Hey guys, today we're going to review the basics of JavaScript, including some of the latest features introduced by ECMAScript 6. ECMAScript is a specification and a standard that was created to standardize JavaScript, and there are some other languages that implement this specification as well. What is JavaScript? JavaScript is a high-level and an interpreted language. It's high level because we don't have to deal with memory management or pointers like in C or C++, even when JavaScript syntax is based on those languages. And it is an interpreted language because you don't need to compile it or generate a binary file to run it. It's a dynamically typed language because you can assign values of different types to the same variable or constant, such as numbers, strings. So you don't have to declare the type of the variable or constant when you define it. It's multi-paradigm because you can code using any of these paradigms: object-oriented programming, functional programming, or imperative programming. JavaScript and Java are two different things. Some beginners and non-tech people get confused, but they have nothing to do with each other. JavaScript is full stack because it runs on the browser, Chrome, Firefox, or in any other web browser, and it also runs on the server using Node.js as the runtime environment. As I mentioned before, it conforms to the ECMAScript specification, but there are some other languages that are ECMAScript compliant, such as ActionScript with Adobe Flash in 1997 and Dart, created by Google in 2011. Why should you learn JavaScript? Because it is the programming language of the browser. You can develop web apps using React, Angular, Vue.js, jQuery, or vanilla JavaScript. You can also develop full stack JavaScript applications. Some popular stacks are known as MERN or MEAN. Basically, MERN stands for MongoDB, Express, React.js, and Node.js, and MEAN stands for MongoDB, Express, AngularJS, and Node.js. You can also develop mobile applications using React Native, NativeScript, Ionic for hybrid applications, etc. And you can also develop desktop application using Electron.js as one of the most popular frameworks for this. Okay, so let's review what are the things that we are going to cover on this crash course. We're going to review variables, constants, and data types. We're going to review arrays, maps, and sets. Object literals. We're going to review some methods for strings, arrays, objects. We're going to review loops, for, while, for each, etc. We're going to review the conditionals, if then, switch, etc. We're going to review the normal functions and the arrow functions. And we're going to review some object-oriented programming concepts, such as prototypes and classes. So let's get started. Okay, so let's get started. I'm using the Visual Studio IDE, and I already installed this live server extension, so it will speed things up. The only thing you need to do here is you go here, you install it, and then you click on Go Live, and it's going to open the browser on this port. And every time you change something here, it's going to automatically refresh the browser. You can include JavaScript code on the head here, or you can include it in the body. You can include it inline using the script tag, doing things like, for example, console.log hi, and let me open first the debugger, and as you can see, it's going to print this. It's going to print the text that I'm logging here. I'm going to remove this, and what I'm going to use is the script tag, but I'm going to include an external file named main.js. In order to do that, I'm going to set the source as main.js. That is stored in the same folder that is this HTML file. In order to debug our code and to check that what we are doing is what we expect, we can use console log. And we can also use some other methods from the console, such as console error. As you can see here, we get that red message. And we can also use the warn method. This is a warning. So we can see that in yellow here. Okay. There are three ways to define variables in JavaScript. We have var, let, and const. Let and const were introduced by ECMAScript 6 in 2015. And var is being used in JavaScript since the very beginning of the language. And the difference is that var is globally scoped and let and const are block level scoped. So let's see an example to see the difference. So let's define a for loop from 1 to 4 using var. Var I equals 0 or equals 1, e less than 5, and I++. And let's log each of these values. As we can see here, we get 1, 2, 3, and 4. But what happens if I do a console log outside the for loop? I'm going to get a 5 because this variable is still visible outside the scope of the for loop. So this can lead to errors. So that's why let is recommended in this case. So let's replace var by let. And now, as we can see, it's going to print 1, 2, 3, and 4, but it's going to throw an error because I is not defined outside the scope of the for loop. So that is why let and const are recommended and var should not be used anymore. So remove this from here. And let's see some differences between let and const. Basically, with let, you can reassign the value of the variable more than once. And with const, you can only assign the value once. So for example, if I define let name equals John, and I reassign that variable to Mike, and I do a console.log of this variable, it's all good, no problem with that. It's going to log Mike. But what happens if I replace let by const? I'm gonna get an error on line 4 because I'm trying to reassign a constant variable, and that's not allowed. And another thing important about constants is that you need to assign a value when you declare the constant. As you can see here, you get an error that says missing initializer in const declaration. So you have to assign a value when you declare your constant. Okay, now that we know what variables are and what are the things that we can do with the variables, let's review what are the data types that we can assign to a variable. So we have 6 different data types. we have string, we have numbers, we have booleans, we have null, undefined, and symbol. Now that we know the different data types that we have in JavaScript, let's create some variables here and let's use those data types. So let's create a string variable. To assign strings, we can use double quotes or single quotes. Let's assign a number variable. Let's say age equals 25. And let's assign another number. Let's say 5.6. There is no decimal type in JavaScript. It's just a number. Let's assign a boolean. We can assign true or false. Let's assign a null value. And let's assign an undefined value. And we can also assign the undefined value by doing something like this. It means that it has no value assigned to it. And the difference with null is that null represents the empty value. Let's check the data types by using the type of function, putting the name of the variable on the right side of that function. So let's print the type of name, that is actually string, as we can see here. The type of age is going to be number. Sorry, type of score is going to be number as well. The type of is cool is going to be boolean. The type of x is going to be object. The type of null is object. The type of undefined, it's undefined. Type of x is object. The type of y is undefined. And the type of seed is going to be undefined as well. Let's see a couple of things about strings. Let's see some operations, some typical operations that we do with strings, like concatenations. So there is one traditional way to do this, that is, for example, let's say that I want to log a message that says my name is John and I am 25. My name is name, and I want to replace, of course, these values with the variables that I previously defined. So my name is name and I am age. So the traditional way to do this is using single quotes or double quotes and doing these concatenations using plus. And this is going to log my name is John and I am 25. Let's add some spaces just to show it better. Okay, my name is John and I am 25. So this is the old way of doing a concatenation, but this has some limitations. If you have a lot of variables to include as part of a text, this is going to be an issue. ECMAScript 6 introduced string templates where we can use where we can do things like this, console.log, and instead of using quotes, we use backticks. And here we can say my name is, and if we want to find a variable here, we use $sign and curly braces, and we put the name of the variable within it. And I am $sign, curly braces, and H. And we get the same here. Okay, let's do some other operations with the strings. Let's remove this. For example, if I want to know the length of the string, I can use name.length. And it's going to be 8. And if I add some more characters here, it's going to be 10. Okay, let's see that I want to transform all the characters to uppercase. I can do something like this, to uppercase. And as we can see here, we get all the characters in uppercase. And the same with lowercase, to lowercase, and we get all the characters in lowercase. We want to get some substring or some part of this string. We can do something like this, substring, and this is going to receive 2 arguments. The string starts with 0 as the first position, then 1 is going to be the O, the H is going to be 2, sorry, and it's going to be 3, and so on. So let's say that I want to get just Sean from this string. So 0 to 4. 0 to 4, and yes, I get Sean. And then I can change some other functions, such as to uppercase, for example. And I get Sean in uppercase. For example, so we can generate an array using the split method. And if we want to, let's say we want to find an array of the letters that are part of this string, we can use the empty string, and we're going to get an array with 10 elements that are all the elements that are part of the string. Let's say that we receive a CSV string, such as, I don't know, banana, tomato, I don't know, milk, lettuce. So in this case, we receive these values separated by comma and space. So I'm going to use that to split these values, and I'm going to get an array with these 4 values: banana, tomato, milk, and lettuce. Now let's review what arrays are. So arrays are basically multiple values. So when we define a variable that is an array, we can put multiple values within it. We can do something like const names, and we can define something like new array. This is a constructor array, and we can pass John, Mike, Pete. And if we console log this array, we're going to get this array with these 3 names. This is like most modern way of defining arrays. The classical way is by using brackets like this. And let's say that we define here an array of numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's log this. And as we can see, we also get an array with these numbers. This is like the traditional way of defining arrays in JavaScript. Another important thing to mention here is that I can add different data types within the same array. I can add strings, I can add booleans, booleans like that, and that's fine. This is allowed by JavaScript, so no problem at all with that. Another key characteristic of JavaScript is that it's dynamically typed. So let's say that you define a variable name equals John as a string, and then you assign to that same variable a number. So for JavaScript, that's totally fine. So if you use TypeScript, that is a superset of JavaScript, then you have to declare the type of the variables, and it won't allow you to do this. So TypeScript is going to force you or to enforce your variables to be of the same type that you declare them when you define them. So it is definitely recommended to check TypeScript and use TypeScript if you can. Going back to arrays. Let's say that I want to access to the first element of this array. I can do something like numbers, and I can access the first element. The index, the first element of the first value of this index is 0. So the indexes start by 0 here. We have 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. So if I want to get the first value of this array, I need to use 0. And as you can see here, I'm printing 1, that is the first value of this array. If I want to access to, I don't know, to Sean. Sean is actually the number 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So numbers of 5 is gonna give me Sean. So I think you get the idea. I want to add a new value to my numbers array. What I can do is I have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So in the 7, for the index number 7, I can assign a new variable. Let's say Mike, and I'm going to print this array, and we're going to see that we have that new value at the end as Mike. Okay, another way to add values here is using the push method. So I'm going to push a number at the end of this array, and let's push 8. I'm going to save this, and as we can see, we have 8 at the end of this array. Okay, let's say that now we want to add a value at the beginning of the array. We can use unshift to do that. Numbers.unshift, and I'm going to add 0 at the beginning of the array. I'm going to save, and as we can see, we have now 0 at the beginning. Another method to remove elements. Let's say that I want to remove the last element of the array. I can do pop, and this is going to remove the 8 from the end. So now we don't have 8 anymore. And if I pop again, I will remove Mike as well. As you can see here, we don't have Mike anymore. Okay, some other functions that we can use. For example, if we want to check that numbers is an array or not, we can use the array that is array. So let's do array that is array, and we pass numbers to it, and it should return true. Yes, as you can see here, it returns true. And let's say that we pass, I don't know, one string to that method. That is going to return false. Numbers is true, the string is not an array, so that's why it is false. Okay, another method that is pretty handy is index of. Let's say that we want to know what is the index value of John. So we can do numbers that index of, and we pass the value John, and we should get numbers, and we should get 6. That is actually the index for John. Okay, there are some other data types that were introduced in ECMAScript 6, such as maps. So basically maps are multiple key value pairs, and we can declare them like this: const map equals new map, using that constructor. And then we can set value pairs like by doing map set, and here we can set the key, let's say 1, and the value 1, for example. And we can set another pair like 2 and the number 2. And if we console.log this map, we get these entries that actually are an array with the key and the value for each element. And if we want to access a specific value, we need to access it by using the specific key. Let's say map.get 2. This is going to print 2, the string 2, that is the value associated to this key. Okay, another data type that was introduced in ECMAScript 6 is sets. In a set, basically you have unique values on it. So let's replace it by set, and we create it by using the set constructor. And here we can say set.add, and we can add a value h1, let's say, and we can concatenate and add some other values, for example h2, and let's say that I want to add h1 again. So if I console log this set, it's going to print just h1 and h2 because it won't allow me to add a repeated value. The same happens if I add h2 again. If I try to do this, it's going to still print one occurrence of each value. And if I want to add a new value, let's say h3. Now we're going to get h1, h2, and h3. Some other operations that we can do with sets is get the size of the set by using the size property. And this is going to log 3 because I have 3 values, h1, h2, and h3. And I can also check if it has a specific value. So I can check if it has, for example, h1. And this will return true because it is part of this set. The same if I check for h4, it's going to return false because it's not part of this set. Okay, let's get started with object literals. Let's say I want to create a person. I'm gonna use curly braces, and let's say that I'm going to set first name, Mike, last name, go, age 23, and we can also assign some other things like hobbies, like this. Sports and movies. And we can also add embedded objects like an address. We can do it like this. We can assign city. And let's do a console log of this literal object. And as we can see, we have the first name, the last name, the hobbies, a typo here. I'm going to change this. Okay, so we have the first name, the last name, the hobbies, that is an array with sports and movies, and then we have the address as an embedded object. Okay, we can also use the structuring. The structuring was introduced in ECMAScript 6, so we can do things like this. Const, let's say that I want to get the first name and the last name of this person, so I can do something like this. First name, last name equals person. And now I'm going to console log first name plus, let's say, space plus last name. And as you can see, we can access the different attributes of this literal object using this expression. This is called destructuring from ES6. Okay, let's say that we want to also access to the address. So we can do something like this. And let's say that I want to access the city specifically. So I'm going to log the city, and I should get Boston here. The same with, the street. Let's say that I want to also get the street. We get the street and the city, as we can see here. Okay, and we can also add properties to this object. Let's say that I want to set the email of this person, email at yahoo.com. And if we do a console log of this person again, we're going to see that it also contains the email attribute here. Okay, when you develop software, you will always deal with arrays. So let's create a tasks array. And each task will have an ID, a name, and if it's completed or not. It's going to be a Boolean. Let's copy paste this. So we have at least 3 elements here as part of this array. Let's say this is task 2, and this was completed. And task 3, that it was completed as well. Let's console log this array. And as we can see, we have the array here with these 3 tasks. A really common format that we're gonna need to use to consume APIs or to invoke or call APIs is gonna be JSON. So let's see how we can transform this array into JSON. So we can do this like this. So we can transform this array to JSON using something like this. We can use stringify, and we pass the array. And if we log this, we're gonna see this array with the JSON format. Let me copy this just to see it better. And this is the format of an array in JSON. All the attributes and the strings are with double quotes. We don't have single quotes in the JSON format. That's one of the differences between using, for example, object literals like this and using a JSON format. Let's do some common operations on arrays, such as iterating them. So we can do this in 3 ways. 2 of these ways are old school, such as the for loop and the while loop. And then we have the for off. That's a new one. That's from ECMAScript 6. The for loop, let's say that we want to log each of the elements within the array. So we can do something like this. We create an index, 0. Remember that all the arrays are 0 based. So what we need to add here is a condition that's gonna be I less than 3, and then the increment of that index that we're gonna use to access the array. And let's replace this by the length of the array, tasks plus length. Okay, so let's do console.log tasks at that position. And as we can see, we get each of the tasks that are part of the array. There is another traditional way to iterate through the array using a while loop. A while loop requires a variable, an index actually, and I'm going to initialize that index, and then the while loop structure requires a condition. In this case, it's going to be that index must be less than the length of the array. I'm going to copy this, and we're going to need to increment the index variable because otherwise this condition is going to be always true, and we're going to get an infinite loop in that case. So I'm going to increment variable, and as we can see, we get the 3 tasks that are part of the array. Let's see now some ex6 for loop, that is the for of. And we can write a for of like this: task of tasks. This is going to be the variable for each of the tasks, or for each of the elements that are part of the tasks array. And I'm going to console log each task. I'm going to save, and as we can see, we get again each of the elements. Okay, let's move on to some functional programming characteristics of JavaScript. Let's see some higher order functions. In functional programming, a higher order function is a function that receives a function as an argument, and it may return a function as a result. So the first one is going to be for each. The second one is going to be map, and the third one is going to be filter. There are some others, but these are the most important ones, or the ones that you're going to use the most. So let's use the for each function, tasks that for each, and then we need to pass here a function. Sorry, task. And within this function, we can console log each task. I'm going to save, and we get the same result. We get each of the elements within the array. Okay, let's change this function and let's use map. A map is a function that receives a function as a parameter and applies that function to each element of the array. So let's do that. And what we can do here, we can actually take, let's create a variable here, let name, and we can get the name of each task. And we can log just the name. Or we can declare, or we can use a variable here. We can name this task names. And in this variable, we get the list of the task names. I'm going to console log this. And we get an array I need to return actually this. Sorry. I need to return this. And now we get, as a result, an array with the names of the tasks. Okay, another higher order function is filter. And in this case, we need to use conditions. For example, let's return all the tasks that are completed. Do something like this. Is completed. We're going to see the difference between double equals and triple equals in a second. And let's rename this as task completed or completed tasks. And let's log the result. And here we get the two tasks that were completed, that are the tasks with name 2 and the task with name 3. Okay, let's review an important concept in JavaScript that is called hoisting. Hoisting means that a variable and a function are physically moved to the top of your code. So one of the advantages is that JavaScript will put the function declarations into memory before you execute them or before the JavaScript runtime executes them. So, for example, let's create a really simple function. Let's create a function called showName, and we pass the name, and we do a console log with that name. So we call it here. That makes sense, right? And we put a name here, right? John, we save, and the function executes successfully. And we can also invoke that function from here. We can invoke the function before declaring the function because of the hoisting property of JavaScript that basically moves the function declaration to the top of the scope. Okay, let's see some conditionals. Let's see if. Let's declare a variable here. I equals 0. And if is a conditional, so you put a condition here, and if this condition is true, it's going to run the code that you put between the curly braces. So if E triple equals 0, then we can say that E is 0. Let's save this, and we get that I is 0. So what is the difference between triple equals and double equals? Here is gonna be true as well. But what happens if I compare the number 0 with the string 0? With double equals, is going to give true because double equals is not checking the type of the variable. But with triple equals, we'll also check the type of the variable, so it's not going to show anything here. Let's add an else here to make it more clear. Is not 0. So we're going to get I is not 0. So that's the difference between double equals and triple equals. Double equals checks the value, and triple equals checks the value and the type. And we can do if and else, and we can also use an else if statement like this. And we can add another condition. Let's say I less than 10. Is less than 10. Okay, here we get that I is less than 10. And here we can get that I is not 0. Let's change this. We get that I is not 0. And I think you get the idea. So let's move on to the ternary operator. With the ternary operator, we have a simplified if statement. And this is the structure. Let's say that we want to assign a color, and we want to associate that color to a specific number. So we can say that let number equals 2. So we can say that if number equals 2, we assign the color blue. And if it's not 2, we assign the color red. Let's console log the color. Oh, sorry, console.log. Yeah, okay. And now we get blue as the color. And if I change this number, let's say 4, I'm gonna get red. Okay, let's see another control structure, that is the switch. And it works like this. Let x equals 3. And we use switch x. And here we can add different conditions. Case 3. Console.log the value is 3. And we need to add a break at the end of each case statement. Let's move this here. Case 4. And we can do something like this. The value is 4. And we have the default case that is named default. The value is not 4, is neither 4 nor 3 nor 4. Okay, in this case the value is 3. If we say that x equals, if we assign x to 4, if we assign 4 to x, we get that the value is 4, is going to execute this statement, is going to execute this case. If we assign 3, is going to execute this case. And if we assign, let's say 5, is going to execute the default case. And let's move on to functions. Okay, let's create a really simple function at num, and we pass num1 and num2, and we return num1 plus num2. Let's console log this. And what happens if we don't pass any arguments? We get none. This is an error that is called not a number. That's what none means. That is not a number. Okay, so what we can do here, we can use default arguments. And by default, we're going to get 1 plus 3 if we don't pass any arguments to the function. And we get 4. That is 1 plus 3. But if we pass 3 and 5, we're going to get 8, for example. And if we pass 6 and 7, we're going to get 13. So let's say that I want to refactor this traditional function, or that the traditional way to create functions is this. But let's say that we want to change this by an arrow function. So we can do something like this. We can create a variable, result equals, adnum equals, and we add an arrow function there. We save this and we get the same result. But if we only have one statement here, we can remove the curly braces. We need to remove the return. And this is going to work just fine. And this is an arrow function. It's a simplified way to write our functions. It's easier to read, it's simpler, one line. And this was introduced by ECMAScript 6, and the same with the default arguments that we've just seen a few minutes ago. Okay, let's move on to OOP. We're gonna see the pre-ES6 version. Pre-ECMAScript 6 OOP, and then ES6 OOP. So what we can do here is using function constructors. We can do something like this: function, person, and we can pass the arguments here: first name, last name. Let's keep it simple. This dot last name equals this dot first name equals first name, and this dot last name equals last name. Okay. And if we want to create an instance of this object, we can do something like this: const equals Mike new person, and we can pass the first name Mike, and the last name Doe. Okay, let's log this. And we get the person. with Mike as a first name and Doe as the last name. And the way that JavaScript extends the functionality is by using a prototype. So we can do something like this: person.prototype that full name, for example. And we can assign a function here. And we can say return this dot first name plus this plus this period last name. And let's log Mike dot full name. Sorry, like this. Okay, and we get the full name, that is the first name plus and space and the last name. And if we log the object, we're gonna see the prototype here. That it contains the full name function that we created here. Okay, that's the traditional way. You can still use it, but let's see the new way of creating objects in ECMAScript 6, that is using classes. So we can create the class person, and we can use the constructor function. Sorry, the constructor method. A method is a function within a class, basically, and we can pass it the parameters. We can pass the first name, the last name, and here we can use the same syntax. And let's say that I want to implement the full name function, or sorry, the full name method. I can do this here. Full name. And I'm going to copy and paste this. And we're going to see that this is actually sugar syntax, because what it's doing is using the same prototype that used in the past. So there are no changes. It's just a sugar syntax is a friendly way to create objects, and is similar to, I don't know, Java, C#, or any other object-oriented programming languages. So I'm going to log. First, I'm going to create a new instance using this class. And I'm going to log this object. And as we can see, we have the same function as part of the prototype attribute here. Okay, let's see how inheritance works in ECMAScript 6. So let's create a new class. Employee extends. This is the way that we say that this class is gonna extend, or is going to inherit from, in this case, the person class. And we need to add a constructor here, and we are going to pass the first name, last name, and the salary. Okay, we can use super to use the constructor of the parent class, that in this case is the person class. And we're going to assign the salary. Okay, so let's create, let's say, employee. And now we get the employee, and we get in the prototype attribute, we get the person, and we're going to get the full name as part of that prototype. So we can use, for example, employee dot full name. Sorry, here. Employee dot full name. And we can see that we get the full name of the employee. But again, this is just sugar syntax, because at the end is using the prototype attribute of the object. Okay, so now you have some of the most important JavaScript fundamentals and some of the latest features introduced by ECMAScript 6. This is Enrique with pragmaticreviews.com signing off. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel, and I see you guys later. Take care. Bye.